Why? Why? Hello, I'm Angel, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you're a subscriber. I'm gonna be a regional Ohio History Day judge. So let's get to it. Judging exhibits, I have judged both the group and individual exhibits. I'm gonna talk a little bit about some of the common issues that I've seen. I'm gonna start with things that are not subjective. The first item that I see students struggling with is the annotated bibliography. It's not uncommon for the students to actually have a bibliography. The problem is the annotation part. Let's talk about what an annotated bibliography is and what it looks like. The format for me is not as important as the content. Some students will put annotated bibliography, some will just have bibliography. I think bibliography is just fine, but annotated bibliography doesn't bother me at all. The next thing will be the subheadings for the types of sources that are being used for the exhibit. If tertiary sources aren't being used, then just delete that. Otherwise, keep it and use it. I don't care what citation style is used as long as it's consistent throughout. This is Chicago style. I just grabbed these citations from a paper I did as an undergrad. I don't care if it's done in this format. This is called a hanging indentation. I don't care if it's all together as long as all of the information is there. Either way is fine for me. This is not about formatting. This is entirely about content. Now, this is what I typically see at History Day, and this is not correct for an annotated bibliography. We need one last element. All right, these sentences don't match with these sources, but I just made them up so that you get an idea. The element that is critical to the annotated bibliography is this sentence that follows the source. Typically, students have one or two sentences. I'm fine with that. I have absolutely no issue with it being short and concise. An annotated bibliography must have this description of how this source is important to the research that was done. If you want to go above and beyond, you can have another page that is your unused sources. But I caution, if you do this, do it exactly the same way that you did this. Unused primary sources, unused secondary sources. Have your citation be consistent in APA or Chicago or whatever format you use, and don't forget your annotation. Because judges sometimes ask, did you come across any sources that you didn't use? Bam, right there. Yes, as you can see on page 3 of my annotated bibliography, I had 2 primary sources, 3 secondary sources, and a single tertiary source that I ended up not using because I felt that they were biased, or whatever the reason is that you want to give. This is above and beyond, completely elective, and if you don't do it right, it could be held against you. The second area where I see students struggling is citing the items that they have on their presentation board. One group had like the actual URL for the website that they got the image or the quote from, and that is not sufficient. The most common mistake is that there's no citation at all. Now I'm going to show you what I think a proper citation should look like. I'm just giving you an example of what the text should be like that accompanies the item on the board. So in this example, it's this picture. You would want to identify the picture. Ideally, it would be a picture of a person that you could identify, but this is a picture, random picture. Anyway, women's right, the rehearsal. Okay. Then you type the location that you got it from. Library of Congress. That is really all you need. You can add more information to your citation. There is no such thing as too much information. So here we have what the item is. And then because this was captured from online, we have the original source, and then we have the source that the image was captured from for this project. That is going above and beyond. Step 1 is just who and where you grabbed it from, and then this is going above and beyond. Both are completely acceptable, in my opinion. Now I'm going to talk about the things that are a little more subjective. The scorecard is broken into several sections, but the section that I want to focus most on, because it's the one that I see the most problems with, is the first block that talks about research, historical context, and analysis. No student ever seems to struggle with building a timeline of events. This year's theme was breaking barriers. They'll choose a subject like America's first female astronaut, and they'll talk about the individual's personal history. Like, she was born, and then she went to college, and then she was accepted into NASA, then she went into space, and then she went on to do these other things. They have difficulty placing the person's life within a greater historical context. I think one of the ways that they could be encouraged to do more research in that area is just to ask them why. Why was there a first female astronaut? Why were there any astronauts? And then when they go back to the start of the space program, they'll get to that part where, well, Kennedy said we were going to do space. Then they'll go back to, this is now the space race and the context of the Cold War. They take the theme and they take the person and they smush it together. This person broke barriers because they were the first to do this. That was the thesis statement on everyone's board. That's not your thesis, that's the title. Don't let them confuse the thesis with their title. The thesis is what they're going to prove, and just saying that so-and-so was the first to do something, that's not very difficult to prove. That, I think, is why the research is so limited. Why was that barrier significant in the first place? And most of the time they say something like, well, because at that time women weren't in the program. Okay, but why? I think that if they have somebody in their life saying why, if they have that information in their mind already, maybe they didn't put it on their exhibit board, maybe they didn't put it in their process paper, but when the judge comes around and asks, they could say, I'm really glad you asked that question. Based on my analysis of the research that we've done, here's our conclusion. My last bit is even more subjective, and it might even be controversial. In my opinion, the groups that are 2 or 3 people tend to do better than larger groups of 4 or 5. In larger groups, I get the impression that there is one person who did the bulk of everything, and then they have their 4 backup dancers. Woo! We're all here sharing in the glory. What I would recommend is encouraging the learner to have a very small group. I would also encourage the learner to read everything. Don't just have one person in charge of reading this particular source and another person in charge of reading this source. Everybody should be reading everything, because that'll give them the opportunity to talk about the information that they've harvested from those sources, and to not only just internalize the information that they have, but to talk about it, to share ideas, and come up with a more holistic analysis. That way they can play the why game with each other. Why? It might be controversial to say having a group of 5 people is really bad. I know that they might feel nervous. We only have this amount of time, and when they're standing in front of us, that feels like a really long time. 15 minutes to somebody who's 12 or 13 years old standing in front of a judge, it feels like a lifetime. As the judge, I want to make sure that every person in that group actually participated in putting the exhibit together, in researching, is actually a valuable member that's contributing to the analysis, the research, creating that historical context for the group. And when I get there and there's one person doing all the talking, and there's 2 or 3 other members of the group who barely make eye contact, I feel like they're not really being given the opportunity to shine. And that to me is sad. They're taking time out of a perfectly beautiful Saturday to be there, and they're just trying to blend into the wall. And I don't want that. I want these kids to walk away from this knowing that, hey, what I contributed was valuable. The judges wanted to hear what I had to say. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. I think you get my point. Have you been a judge for the Regional, State, or National History Day? And what have you been a judge for? Have you done exhibits like me, or maybe you did websites? Leave a comment down below. Do you agree with my tips? What are some tips of your own? Share them below so that others can learn. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit the little bell icon so that you get notifications of when I post a new video. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.